We are getting ready here on this Friday afternoon for the walk through Christmas outside here at CBC. There's all sorts of bales and sets being set up, and we're looking forward to that. If you're hearing this before December 18th, come out and join us on the December 18th evening at 6 to 8 p.m. We'd love to see you. We wanted to talk a little bit, as we've been talking about the rest that God gives, we wanted to talk about sleep, the sleep that He provides. We've talked about the inner rest that we can have, an outer rest that God brings, the rest from having to work and to find our identity in our work, the rest that comes in salvation. In Psalm 121, it's a famous one. I lift my eyes up to the hills. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. He will not let your foot be moved. He who keeps you will not slumber. Behold, he who keeps Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. Luke, you've got a brand new baby in your house.
Yes.
And what's sleep been like for you as of late?
It has been more challenged than it's been in the past, for sure. As anybody with children knows, it's come and go. Some nights are better than others, and maybe as most husbands know, I will say it's been maybe better for me than it's been for my wife. But it's definitely a change, for sure.
Yeah, I know, Gary, you and I have had periods in life where we have had more and less sleep with more kids. Certainly there is less sleep. I'm sure that you've had opportunity to reflect on the nature of sleep, and maybe what does sleep teach us about rest, which maybe is an interesting question, but what does it teach us about rest?
Yeah, now are you speaking about rest in just a practical sense of the word?
Yeah, let's start in a practical sense.
Sure. So I think it should be part of, we should expect it to be part of the rhythm and pattern of our life that God has made us. He made us, we know, fearfully and wonderfully, so we are designed in a certain way, and we are designed to sleep. We are not like Him in this way. So there are ways in which we are like Him, of course, we're made in His image, but many ways in which He is, of course, transcends us as well. And so one of these ways is that we are made to require sleep, and then I think that does point to rest, that rest is part of our regular rhythms as well. It's not just the goal. We've spoken about that the previous 2 weeks, about how rest is in one sense the objective of us. It's not only to bear His image, but to ultimately we bear His image perfectly in this restful state that is complete and perfect union with Christ.
So we want to think about sleep maybe first from a biblical perspective. We could talk about, and we will talk about, the practical benefits of sleep here in a few minutes. But Luke, maybe start us off with, where would you want to start us in terms of thinking about a theology of sleep as it relates to rest?
Yeah, so jumping off of what you were saying, Gary, the idea that we were created in a way that we require rest, I think that the best place to start is this idea that we as created beings are dependent. God as God, as uncreated, is not dependent, as the psalm that you read says. So God never slumbers or sleeps. He never runs out of energy. But we do. We are dependent. We are not able to act in the way that God does. And so one of the most important things that sleep teaches us about is our own physical dependence, our need to stop, and our then, which would lead to the humility to realize that we are not all powerful. We are not like God in that way.
Yeah.
Gary, what else would you add to that here as you think about a theology of sleep?
Yeah, I think a very helpful one, and this is both, I think, maybe theology and biblical theology. Psalm 127:2 very clearly speaks both to the vanity of not submitting to patterns of sleep and rest in your life, Psalm 127 verse 2, but also speaks to it being a gift that He gives. This is the Lord. He gives to His beloved sleep. And it's interesting that He puts the word beloved in. I think this is showing that it's more than just a a practical gift. I think it's a gift of love to us, and I don't think we see it as this. But we ought to. We should think maybe and reflect on how or why God made us this way. You could argue, why would he do this? Like, why would he make us to require sleep? Wouldn't we be more productive? We are paid by the church to give full-time service during our working hours to the growth of the kingdom, discipleship of a people. Wouldn't everybody be able to do that? If they didn't have to sleep, they could work a secular job, as it were, and work for the church. But God has designed us this way, and so I think it's rethinking. We've talked about this a little bit in the past 2 weeks as well. Rethinking how we see sleep. That this is not merely it's not a detriment to productivity. That it's actually something that if we reject it, we're rejecting a gift, a loving gift of God.
Yeah, and there is a sense in which we can fall into two dangers here. We can fall into the danger of excessive sleep, which the Bible condemns in terms of slothfulness and laziness. 6. That's right. And we could talk about the danger of rejecting sleep and rejecting our limits as creatures, and rejecting the fact that if we think that we can function on less than what God desires for us, that we'll burn out, and we'll discover that we have creaturely limits. We can create other health issues. And so there is a dependency. We're not like God, as you've said. We want to embrace the good gift that God has given. And by embracing that gift, we actually embrace our creaturely limits and embrace the infinite God who gives his beloved sleep. When we think about sleep practically, Luke, why is it important that we sleep just on a practical basis?
Yeah, because our bodies need it. As we talk about how we are created, our bodies are incredibly complex biological machines that have hormones and chemicals that operate within our bodies, within our brains, that make it such that we need to sleep to function, for our bodies to work as they need to, for our bodies to recover from what happens to them over the course of a day, and for our minds even to recover as well and to grow. It's sleep from the moment we're born for all through our life is a huge important part of living, because that's how we were created, and that's how God made us, fearfully and wonderfully made, as Gary mentioned.
What else, Gary, would you add to that?
Yeah, and I think this is probably bleeding into our past category as well, in terms of a theology of sleep, but also the practical outworkings of that. And I would say restful sleep. So that sleep that is regenerative, that sleep that aids our production, doesn't steal from productivity in our life, goes hand in hand with trust. And David in Psalms 3 and 4, there's an interesting play with sleep in both of those Psalms. In Psalm 3, there's almost a restlessness of David as he's thinking of his enemies, and what would be the worst thing for a general or a king to do would, of course, to be to sleep, not only sleeping on the job, but the vulnerability that you have. And so he says, I lay down and slept, I woke again, for the Lord sustained me. I will not be afraid of many thousands of people who have set themselves against me all around. So he's thinking of his enemies, those that are pressed against him, and how can he, we all feel like that sometimes, like, how can I afford to sleep? I'm too busy. I've got so many things I need to accomplish. Those would be our enemies, our to-do lists, right? But then in Psalm 4, he finds that he has peace when he trusts in the Lord for his safety. So rather than himself requiring the defense of himself in his own strength, in peace I will both lie down and sleep. For you alone, O Lord, make me dwell in safety. And so I would just encourage you, like, if you do struggle in sleep and being really restful from your sleep or in your sleep, think about your trust. Are you going to bed with great anxieties, or do you really go to your bed and say a child's prayer? Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. And we're in a very defenseless state when we're sleeping. And I think that speaks to the trust that we must have when we go to sleep, we must trust that the Lord will wake us, regenerate us, and that all those things, all those concerns, that worries that we have, the world's still going to turn around on its axis regardless of whether we're awake or asleep. So just rest in the Lord and find your peace as David did.
Lots of comparisons there to previous conversations we've had on Sabbath as well. Sabbath and trust are so closely intertwined, and Sabbath and rest and sleep are so closely intertwined that trust is super important.
Well, Luther, he had a practice where when he would go to bed, he would pray, Lord, keep me safe through this night from sin and evil and danger. And in the morning he would wake and he would thank the Lord, thanking him for a night of sleep and rest and keeping him from harm and danger. Yeah. And it was the first thing that he would do in the morning, the last thing he would do at night. And it was just a recognition of human dependency, a recognition of the goodness of the gift of God, a recognition that he is incredibly vulnerable. We live in far more secure times than Luther did, and definitely more secure times than David did. The psalm you referenced, Psalm 3, David's on the run from his own son, who's trying to basically kill him and assassinate the king. And so there's a tentativeness about lying down to sleep when your enemy is pursuing you. We can think about, in practical terms, how the body is designed. Luke, you were referring to this. The body is designed with intricacies that when we don't get enough sleep, our metabolism can suffer. A good night's sleep, scientific evidence shows, if you are studying for a test or an exam or preparing for something, to fall asleep and lock in that information, it actually helps the synapses in your brains to just circulate and keep and cement that information, moving it from short term to long term. There's lots of practical benefits in terms of heart health and rhythms and functions in life.
Physical health as well.
Yep.
Even for the building of muscle, you need rest. It's not just resistance training and protein powders. It's that you rest properly.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about how can we're not a great culture at sleep. Since the advent of the electric light, we have decided that we are going to defy the natural rhythms. Definitely this time of year, we could be, if we didn't have electricity, we could be going to bed at 6 o'clock and waiting till 6:30, 7 o'clock the next morning to get up. We could have 12 and a half hours of sleep. So we've tried to fight in some ways with electricity against the natural rhythms of creation. But we do need to develop better rhythms for sleep. Luke, what would be some suggestions in terms of how can we sleep better as we think about some of these biblical principles?
Yeah, even just starting at the most foundational level, even this framing the question in terms of rhythms. Rhythm is such an important part of sleep. Consistency is such an important part of sleep. Now, of course, none of us here are sleep scientists, so we are no experts here, but we do our own research, and we've tried throughout our lives to learn how to sleep better as well, and we've been able to find good research. And what's very clear, I'm very grateful that God has made us in his image and given us a mind and has given us the ability to learn about the world and ourselves and do research. And it's very clear that our bodies function on rhythms, on schedules, on consistency. That is so important. I've recently learned all about how important it is specifically to wake up at the same time every morning. I always thought, as long as you go to bed at the same time, that's the important thing. But it seems to be that the opposite is true. You can almost go to bed whenever. What's really important for your body's rhythm seems to be when you wake up. To wake up consistently at the same time every day is such an important part of establishing those very, very deeply rooted biological rhythms in your body. I can think of no better thing to do to help improve sleep. It can be daunting for those who struggle to wake up or who struggle in the mornings, but it is to set an alarm for a time and wake up at that time every day, whether you are going to work, whether it's a weekend, whether you're on vacation, will help your body to sleep better.
Yeah, definitely rhythms. I know that's been something that I've worked on a lot over the last 15 years, is just similar time to bed, similar time to get up.
Yeah.
And very rarely will I deviate from what time I try to wake up. Now, we don't always have that privilege, but Gary, I know there's other factors too that we can do to help our sleep. What are some things that you'd recommend?
Probably a couple of things. One, practical, and many of you may know this already, but darkness. It is part of. We've spoken about rhythms, even the creation rhythms, and so darkness is when humans have always slept, and so to recreate that, try to have, we live in most of us at least are living at least in the village, if not in the city of London, and so you don't have darkness at night. You've got street lights. You've got, if you're living actually close to the city center in London, you've got towers that are lit all night long. So try to have good coverage of your windows with good blinds. Some people wear sleep masks as well, just to be in darkness. And then I would say you might benefit from a pattern before you go to bed as well, sort of a routine that helps you get into rest. And that routine for some people might be some habits, like you turn off devices, you stop looking at screens, you don't television or devices. Perhaps reading would help. Maybe it wouldn't help, but many people in the past have read before going to bed. Something to get you ready. And then on the less practical side, the more spiritual side, I would say, I already pointed to this earlier, the importance of going to bed with a trustful, faithful mindset. And so if you are worrying about what you didn't get done today, you go through your list and that's what haunts you, is you didn't cross off 4 of your 12 to-do list things. That's not a great way to enter into rest and to be restful in your sleep. So learn how to cast your cares unto the Lord. And when I say cast, not like a fishing cast that you reel back in. It really is, you cast it and forget it. You really do have to leave it with the Lord and trust that the world, like I said before, is still going to turn around, whether you're asleep or not. And so get sleep because you need it.
Yeah, we definitely need to develop and work at rest. There's no doubt about it. If there's something that our culture doesn't know how to do, it's knowing how to rest. So like you've mentioned, Gary, for some people it's reading the same book. They've read it before. It's a light, airy novel. It's familiar. There's no shock or surprise. So if you're a personality that struggles with maybe being jolted awake by or being stimulated by something, you may want something familiar that calms you or quiets you. Some people use melatonin that stimulates sleep. That can be unhelpful for some people. So that's something that if you're struggling with sleep, you may want to talk with your doctor, who will give you better medical advice. Definitely, David talks about, and this has been a common experience through the ages, Psalm 63, people would wake up in the middle of the night and they would have awake periods. And that's not uncommon throughout human history. David talks about it in Psalm 63, verse 6. I remember you upon my bed and meditate on you in the watches of the night. For you have been my help, and in the shadow of your wings I will sing of your joy. And so there is a sense in which even in the middle of the night, there is a need to, if you struggle to get back to sleep, just practically quieting your heart, staying in bed. I know that one of the practices that I've had to develop is I make my bed for sleeping. It's not somewhere that I work. It's not somewhere that I'm reading. It's if I'm getting into bed, it's a wind down time. It's time to sleep. And then if I'm awake, I try to get up. There are times where you may just struggle in the middle of the night and just quieting your soul and allowing that to be a reflecting upon what has God done? What has God been good in doing? I know my grandmother, she often talks about how she struggles to sleep at night, and so she lies in her bed and she prays. She's 94, and that's what she does. She could get up, but she'd rather just stay in bed, keep her heart quiet, and cast her troubles onto the Lord. This is a good time of year. It's dark. It's a lot easier to enjoy a good night's rest, but the busyness of the season, it may tempt you to keep going. So just encourage you. If you're struggling with sleep, it's something that's worth talking to your general practitioner doctor about. And we're glad to talk with you too about some of the spiritual elements that can help contribute to a better night's rest.
Amen.
We're going to take a break from Table Talk over the next several weeks, and we'll return in January, where we're going to talk about what it means to be resolved, being resolved to the Lord. We have to make New Year's resolutions. So until then, you'll see us on Sundays, and Lord willing, we'll see you. So thanks for joining us on Table Talk, and God bless you, and have a Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Bye.